Hello! Today we are going to make beef stew. The star of our dish is beef chuck. We have chopped that into even-sized pieces for even cooking, but also so that it fits nicely on our spoon. You want to note that we use this cut simply because of all of that beautiful marbleization. That's going to make this really tender because we're going to cook this in our slow cooker. So we've got about 2.5 pounds of beef. We're going to use about 2 tablespoons of tomato paste. We're going to use our mirepoix, which is even amounts of chopped onions, celery. In this case, this was about a medium-sized onion, about 3 stalks of celery, depending on the size, but you want these to be about the same amount. And then we've got our carrots. You'll see I'm using baby carrots. And my baby carrots I've left whole. This is because as I go ahead and cook this, I like to have a little bit of texture. So I leave these whole. They kind of match in length the size of the beef. We also have 2 bay leaves that we're going to put in. We'll ultimately discard these. We have about 3 chopped garlic cloves. I've got about 1.5 pounds of, in this case, these happen to be red potatoes. You can use golden potatoes, but again, size matters here. So we've chopped those up sometimes in half, sometimes in 1/4, depending on the size. I've got a really healthy bunch of thyme. This thyme is from our garden, and I have allowed it to dry, so I'm just going to put it in just like that. We've also got our beef broth. We've got, this is about 32 ounces of beef broth. It's going to help enhance the flavors. We're going to do salt and pepper to taste, and we're going to use a little bit of oil as we brown our meat. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started on browning our beef. We've got a nice hot pan. Add about 2 tablespoons of oil. You can use vegetable oil. I happen to have olive oil on hand. I'm going to go ahead and give that just a moment to get heated up. And then in batches, we're going to add our meat. So we want to make sure that the meat actually has a chance to brown. And you can see that it's already sizzling when I put it in. So we're going to go ahead and do this in batches. And as it's done, we're going to go ahead and not crowd our pan. So you might have to do it in 2 or 3 batches, depending on how big your pan is and how much meat you have. So we're not terribly crowded here. I'm going to let that cook. You want to make sure you get a nice good sear on each side. That develops the natural sugars that are in the meat. So as you put your meat in, if you pay attention to which one's your first one, see how that has turned brown? We're going to get it even browner as we go through each of these because we want a nice hard char on them. So you're going to do this in batches, and as it's ready, we're going to put it into our crock pot because we're going to do this all in the slow cooker. So get your meat browned in batches, and then we're going to come back and do our vegetables. So you can see our meat is really beautifully browned on both sides. And we're going to just take that out now, and we're going to put it into the crock pot. And we're going to add our vegetables now. So let's get all of this out. We're going to put a little bit of oil in here just so that we can saute our vegetables. So about a tablespoon, maybe a little bit more. I start with the onions. And the reason I do that is so that they won't burn as quickly as the garlic. So we'll get all of that in here. They'll also release a little bit of water, and it helps me get up some of the beef that has perhaps stuck down on the bottom of the pot. It's called the fond. Okay, next thing I do is add in the carrots. And then we're going to add in our celery. We still have this on a medium-high heat. We want these to brown ever so slightly. And once I start to see that browning, we're going to go ahead and add in the garlic and our tomato paste. But we're also going to season as we go. So we're going to add in our salt. Okay, this is to taste. I'm adding about a teaspoon of salt. I'm also going to add pepper. We're going to season again. So I'm just seasoning what I have here right now, which is the vegetables. The beef was seasoned before it was seared. Stir that up to make sure our salt got everywhere. All right, so we're going to give that just another moment. And we're going to add in our garlic. Remember, garlic burns, so we don't want to put it in first. Just going to give everything that's touching the pan right now a moment while I get my tomato paste ready. And we're adding about 2 tablespoons of tomato paste. Okay. I have a little bit more on my spoon. Get that off. All right, so go ahead and get that all mixed in. And what I'm doing right now by getting everything going in our pot, you could certainly do this in a Dutch oven and keep it on a low flame on the stove for like 45 minutes. I'm going to put it in the slow cooker, and by doing that, I'm going to get all of that flavor to marry and make a really delicious outcome. So now that I've mixed all that up, I'm going to add in some of the beef broth. And you'll see, just want it to get a little bit thick down there with the tomato sauce. We want to kind of get that to become a little bit less of a paste and a little bit more of a sauce consistency. All right, that's exactly what I was looking for. Now we're going to take all of this and put it into our crock pot. All right, so we're going to get all of our vegetables out of our pot and put it into our crock pot. And this is going to cook for about 6 hours on low. Could go up to 8, but I do it for 6 hours since I start it on the stove like this. And that allows me to go ahead and go do other things. So I'm going to put in my bay leaf. I'm going to put about half of the thyme that you saw earlier. Put the whole thing in there. I'm going to put the rest of the 32 total ounces of beef broth. If you have your own homemade beef broth, all the better. All right, so you can see it almost comes all the way up to the top. I'm going to add a little bit of salt since we just put in the beef broth, and a little bit of pepper. Okay, you can always adjust the seasoning afterwards, and we're going to cover this and at about When it's got about an hour left, I add in the potatoes, so we'll do that at the end. So for now, we're going to go ahead and put this in the crock pot and get it going. Our beef stew has about another 4 hours, 4.5 hours to go. And I'm going to go ahead and add in our potatoes. What you're going to notice is that these are not the red potatoes I started with. These are actually potatoes from our garden, and I wanted to use those instead. They are new potatoes. You can see they're fairly small. And because they're small, I haven't cut them up. So we're just going to go ahead and add them in. I've cleaned them all. They've been with a vegetable brush, so they're good to go. So we're just going to make sure they're all fairly submerged, and then just cover this up for the next 4.5 or so hours. Our beef stew is ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and ladle it into my bowls. And you want to try and make sure you get a good combination of everything. And if you don't like how soupy it is, you'll notice I did not use any flour. I don't use flour because we have a gluten intolerance in our home. However, you could dust the beef with flour before you brown it, and you can do that. It'll help thicken this up. You can make a roux and add it in if you'd like, or you can do what I do when I'd like to have it be a little more, a little thicker than just like a soup like it is now. I'll remove all of the potatoes and the beef, and then I'll use an immersion blender and I'll go ahead and puree the vegetables, and that'll thicken it up just enough. So I'm just going to top this with a little bit of parsley, and we're ready to go. So if you haven't made beef stew, 'tis the season, because that's delicious.